Hi, and welcome to the Together podcast. We are your hosts, Mike Elliott and Courtney Wren. This is the place where we get to dive into the juicy terrain of conscious partnership and conscious parenting. Courtney and I have devoted our entire life to expanding our resources when it comes to this relational space, which we like to call sacred relationship. Today, we have a really special guest with us in person, in the flesh, in our studio for us to have a conversation with. This is our dear friend, Dr. Kevin Preston. He is a master when it comes to Chinese medicine, energetic healing, and he has created an event called The New Human. There's already been 2 of them. This will be the 3rd. And the theme of this one is regeneration. Some of the speakers are going to be Zach Bush, Charles Eisenstein, Dr. Kevin Preston himself will be speaking, Courtney and I will be speaking, and Andrea Gurr. And I can already, as I'm saying this, I'm getting chills. The energy that's been building for this event has been incredible. You know, we're over 350 tickets, I think 380 tickets or something that we've already sold, and you can still get your ticket. It's September 11th right now, and you still have time. October 4th to the 6th is the event, or that's for the full experience, or you can get general admission, and that is October 5th and 6th. So if you want to join us there in this incredible experience that we're all going to be a part of, then I want you to go to the New Human. There's going to be a link down in the show notes. Go get the link, click on that, and use the promo code TOGETHER15. That's going to give you 15% off your ticket. Just in thanks for tuning into this show, to give you a little extra incentive to go. And oh my God, this is going to be a life-changing experience, just like the last 2 have. So if you feel the pull, and maybe you don't feel the pull yet, but maybe after this episode, as we dive into this juicy terrain, maybe then you do. So go back to the show notes, click on that link, go buy your tickets, use that promo code. And we would love to see you there in person. Okay, so today's episode, we are going to be diving in. All right, Courtney and I are really excited to have one of our best friends in the physical studio, not over Zoom, real flesh. Dr. Kevin Preston, our dear friend, drove in last night. We're having a bit of a few-day hangout, and we're going to be sinking into some juicy terrain. What did we end up calling it?
The energetics of
biology.
The energetics of biology in relationship?
Yes. The energetic biology of relationship.
Energetics.
We can spin it.
Something along those lines.
The energetics of biology in relationship.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
And we're so stoked to be going into this terrain because Courtney and I have experienced how much our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being have impacted our relational space.
And how much the relational space has impacted our well-being.
Yes.
Our physical well-being.
Truth.
And what we've experienced from Kevin, he's been such an ally in the physical, biological, energetic, well, all of it, and the relational. But his zone of genius, what he supports in his clinic is really that biological, energetic, spiritual realm. And so
he's a Chinese medicine doctor.
Yes.
Yeah, that's like his roots.
Yeah, and a relational master.
Ah.
We were actually just talking about this last night a little bit. My experience of Kevin is he does this one form of his work, or one form of your work is, I'm looking right at you, is doing this testing, this form of testing. And what I was reflecting to Kev is how much the testing's great, but it's really what Kev offers in relationship, how
His
safe,
presence.
yes, how safe I feel in my body, his contact when he holds my feet and my hands, and
Mhm.
how much that's added to my well-being. So I'm excited to dive into all the levels and the terrain of what really lights you up and bringing it
Mhm.
into the relational focused place.
Mm.
And
Thanks
it
for being here.
Yeah, and juicy to even feel into how relationship itself lives inside our body and the way that everything relates with each other, you
Yeah.
know?
Well,
And
and all the layers around biology and quality of relationship, we are talking about that is not it's not related to time together. It's like the quality of the time together and
yeah.
what happens in our cells as a result of that, either positively or negatively.
Mhm.
Because in the clinic there is such a dynamic of seeing all the layers happening for patients with their diseases or illnesses or symptoms, and really what lights me up is getting to the bottom of what is going on here.
Mm.
And what I've discovered over 15 plus years of practice is the relational dynamics in their life are maybe the most important thing
Mhm.
in relationship to their illness and their symptoms, but people haven't really been taught that. And
Yeah.
that's like the most important dynamic going on, and it gets overlooked
Mhm.
regularly.
Mhm.
And I would even say too, the compartmentalization of health that is alive in our society still really creates a lot of disconnect
Mhm.
between these different pieces that actually really need to be connected
Are
to be
interconnected.
understood properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that what I hear there is the holistic piece.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How holistic that situation is.
Yeah.
They're not separate.
Mhm.
Well, and I've seen thousands of patients, and they sometimes report different things that they've been told and by other practitioners, and not to downgrade anybody's expertise or willingness to help, but in some cases they've been told, oh, what you eat or your diet doesn't really impact your status in your
Right.
body, and you're
Right.
like, okay, no.
Yeah.
And oh, your quality of your work life and your career, your mission, your passions, that's not going to influence your body either.
Mhm.
And again, like these are really key pieces. Or how's your relationships and your closest ones? They have the greatest impact on your health. And there's a lot of studies now to support that. Like the quality of your relationships really dictate the quality and longevity of your life. And
Mhm.
so that really big influence doesn't always get into medicine
Mhm.
in clinic spaces, doctor visits, and things. That's not usually talked about very much.
Mhm.
I feel like that's a really juicy place to start. We were talking about this last night, and I think this can really resonate for a lot of people. It's going right into the medical system and how much impact there is in that relationship of vulnerability when somebody, let's say, goes to the hospital, they're going to the specialist, they're going to the doctor, and they're given information in that vulnerable place and how much that impacts what's
Mhm.
happening in their physical,
Hmm.
emotional, spiritual well-being.
Mhm.
Like we were just sharing, we won't name names, but I feel like we should bring in some of the stories of the examples we know that have happened.
Mm.
Like where, so, really close friends of ours, or a close friend of ours went to the doctor just getting checked out, getting prepared for birth.
Mhm.
And the doctor, and this isn't really judgment, this is what we want to explore here, is the discernment of what adds to physical, emotional well-being. And so here's this woman that goes in to get checked out, preparing for birth, and is told by the doctor, you're too small, and that's going to impact you having a child.
Mm.
And how much that relationship in that space can really impact
Mm.
whether she takes that information or not. Like if she actually takes that in and believes it, she may not have a child. That's going to affect the whole family field. It's going to
Hmm.
impact the relationship. It may bleed in resentment between the partners. And
Mm.
I'm curious how much in your field you've experienced repair by someone coming to you because of what was exchanged or offered in
Hmm.
the relationship in the medical system that's maybe a little emotionally disconnected
Yeah.
or misinformed or
Yeah. This is a fascinating aspect, I think, of life and medicine in general, is that even when I feel into previous versions of me
Mm.
as a practitioner, I have way more experience now than I did when I started. Like, we all have to start somewhere. The things that I probably told patients early in my career, I probably wouldn't say now because
Mm-hmm.
I've learned more, I've gained more experience, I've got more wisdom, I've seen thousands and thousands of cases, and it's like colored my view and my way of communicating and expressing what I feel like is happening in their bodies or their health, and how to direct them back to really healthy spaces. And so there's definitely times where I think back to patient visits from 10 years ago and I cringe a little bit of, did I give them good advice?
Uh-huh.
I probably gave them the best advice I could with what I understood at the time.
Yeah.
And the beauty of life is that we get to keep growing and learning more and more and more. And this is one of the reasons in Chinese medicine, if you're in China, most people want to see the guy that's 100 years old as a
Mm-hmm.
practitioner because he might have 80 years of experience, which is really valuable or potentially really valuable. So, time in the clinic is not necessarily equal to effectiveness,
Yeah.
because I do know practitioners that have been practicing a long time, and I want to bring this into the relationship dynamics too of, people could be married for 30, 40 years, but that does nothing to speak to the quality of their relationship and the health of them as individuals together in the community. How does that all land? Like, time
Mm-hmm.
doesn't equal success or
Mm-hmm.
effectiveness in my view.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that's true in medicine, that you could practice for a long time, but if you're not taking the learning and interacting in a way that, feeds more experiential wisdom that then brings more value to every visit, you could be sitting there 8 or 10 hours a day continuously for years and
Mm-hmm.
not really have progressed very much in what you're offering.
Yeah.
And so when we look at medicine as a whole today, you spoke to it a little bit. I do feel like there's a lot of disconnect
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of practitioners don't have time with their patients. So right away, you're on the clock, you're rushed, the patient's rushed, the doctor's rushed.
Mm-hmm.
That immediately can erode quality of care. And then there's a lot of misses that can happen. And I know for myself, if I feel stressed, rushed, and I've got 100 people in the waiting room, if I had a practice like that, I can imagine I'm not present. I'm already on to the second, third, fourth patient of the day at the same time because they're waiting. For me personally, I don't like people waiting. I don't like when I get behind, then I could get stressed out and I get dysregulated. The quality of my care would definitely go down.
Uh-huh.
Whereas the practice that I've developed over the years, I have quite a bit of time with people at times, and I still get behind and I still am aware of the clock, and I want to be of service and be really dialed in as much as I can, but I love being able to sink in and really listen to what people are saying. And now that I've been in practice for some time, I would say that probably is one of the things that creates the most impact in a positive way, is just spaciousness of connection and time to really hear what's going on for them.
Mm-hmm.
And people often know what's going on for them if you listen. And I'll ask, what do you think is affecting you the most? And you can tell in a lot of cases they've never been asked that before.
Mm-hmm.
They're asking the doctor, what do you think is going on with me? And I kind of feel like, how do I know? I don't spend all day with you, but let's unpack that a little bit. Let's find together what's actually going on. And I usually say health is a team sport.
Mm-hmm.
And, between my patient and I, or whoever's in the room, like between all of us, we can figure out quite a bit actually in a fairly short period of time if we're willing to communicate, and if I'm willing to just be present and listen and not judge what's going on, but really just observe in a neutral space. But that there is definitely connection there
Mm-hmm.
because we're human. And I am too, even though I'm a practitioner and I might be sitting in this chair, but I also know what it's like to sit in the patient chair.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find I move my energy or awareness back and forth during visits like that because I actually want to know what's going on for them.
Well, and what you're speaking to there, Kevin, it makes me feel this is where your relational ecosystem, right? Like how you are in relation shapes how you're able to show up in that moment,
Mm,
right? So your friendships, relationships, how you are with your own body, how you are with your children, all of these things make up your capacity to show up for a patient in that way, and how much the minute we come into another's field, we are influenced by the quality of our relationships in our capacity to then meet another.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And our ecosystems, literally, like when we come into connection, our relational ecosystems are connecting,
Yeah.
right? And the morphic field is connecting. So it's not just the beautiful way you make eye contact or the way that you ask questions or the way you draw them out. It's also the energy in your field that is holding all of the beautiful relational moments you've had, all of the healers that have been relational with you and slowed down and asked you, what do you think's going on, Kevin? All of that is
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah.
And and this is where, as practitioners, as people, we have to understand that, when we get so hyper focused on, this is what
Mhm.
I'm trying to fix. I'm a doctor, so I just look at this, or I'm this and I just look at that. And we lose that understanding of how influenced we are by our relational ecosystem. We literally cut off the holistic picture. I'm in a shamanic training right now, and what they talk about is, shamans around the world, if people got sick, the first question would be, where are you in out of right relation with, like, that's the question. Where are you out of right relation with self, with the earth, with your community, with your partner, with
Mhm.
spirit? Where is that? And then that's where we need to work.
Yeah.
But that is this whole picture, right? The whole picture of relationship, not just this. And that's what I'm really hearing, and how you're meeting people, and how often all of us can do this. Oh, well, that's my relational life, or oh, well, that's my body, or people
That's my
will,
work.
yeah,
That's my money thing.
we'll notice this in couples where they'll be sitting in a session, and they'll say, oh, well, this way that I'm not able to be present right now with my partner isn't about that, it's about my shoulder, let's say, because my
Mm.
shoulder hurts.
Mhm.
Right? And I get it. For them, it's, well, my shoulder hurts is not about this relationship. But what we're inviting is, they are connected.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting that your shoulder hurts right now, as we are talking about this certain topic, or as we're
Mhm.
sitting here and starting to weave and challenge that separation piece,
Yeah.
right?
And then asking that deeper question like you do with your patients of, when did that start, that
Yeah.
shoulder pain? Oh, well, my partner and I had this argument and it
Mhm.
went into this thing and I've really been stewing about it for a few days.
Mhm.
And I sorry, it's just my shoulder's really bugging me. Oh, it's starting to really amp out right now. I need to slow down. It's like, huh, interesting. So
Yeah.
as we're talking about this thing, can you see a correlation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love what you named there is inquiring and asking the questions. Like, can
Mhm.
you notice
Mhm.
anything there? Can you see that those are connected?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because where this actually shows up, and directly experienced that, even in the beginning when we first met, previous to that, it was like 10 years of personal development, reading the
Mm.
books, seeing massage therapists, seeing
Mm.
people, like getting work done, but becoming more depressed, more
Mhm.
anxious, confused, frustrated, irritable, reactive. And it wasn't until I started to really build out what you're speaking to here is this relational ecosystem, started to lean into people who could hold me,
Mhm.
spiritual mentors and teachers, learning about my emotions, and then attracting relationships that are good for me, that are
Mhm.
resonant, where we are helping each other evolve. And when I think back to when we first met, like 9 years ago, that was a real pivotal moment where we were a part of a men's group. And that was life changing
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
be surrounded by other men willing to go to those places that I judge were uncomfortable, going in and feeling feelings, allowing the vulnerable place to be at the forefront in relationship to other men that we may be triggered by and have insecurities
Yeah.
invoked in, and how much that has rippled out. Like when we fast forward, we look at our life, holy, like
Mhm.
our community, our
Mhm.
therapists, the
Mhm.
people we lean into, how much that adds the resource to be able to do the work that we do. And what I judge from
Yeah.
watching you is how much that gives you the resource to do the good work that you're doing in the one-to-one.
Mhm.
Well, and everything that you're speaking to, what I'm seeing in medicine now, and with my patients, culturally, retreats, events, all of these things, and places where I'm participating or I'm leading, that there has been quite a disconnect between each of these places.
Mm-hmm.
That somebody might be doing a lot of mental emotional work, but they may not be fully connected to the physical aspects of their body yet. Like they
Mm-hmm.
might be working in that direction, but there's often a gap there. And so I'm seeing that a lot in my clinic right now, that people are learning more, they're accessing more. We have way more availability for information. You know, we all love podcasts, and this is amazing because we get to share information that previously you maybe had a hard time finding if you were a person in the public trying to figure out what was going on in your body. So we have huge access to data and information for one, and I still see a disconnect between like the spiritual kind of mental emotional pieces and the physical. So it feels like what my role is becoming more now is being at the center of that hub and bringing people into that where all of
Mm-hmm.
those pieces converge
Yeah.
and connect, because it's actually the disconnect or the separation of each of those pieces that often led to their illness in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, being in men's groups together, retreats and different things that we've experienced, that's what I love about it, is it brings all these pieces together. And as a practitioner, it's so liberating because I get to work on the physical body.
Mm.
I can speak to them about the mental emotional aspect. I can speak to them about the spiritual aspect and where they're at in each of these places. But then I usually start to see the picture of where they're maybe off center
Mm-hmm.
with holding all of those together.
Mm-hmm.
And that, oh, this one's way over here, this one's way over here. And they maybe have a depth capacity in each of these places, but they're not connected.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so actually one of my sessions I did yesterday with somebody, just a distance session, that was the vision that I got as we tuned in together. And she was sharing more of what she's experiencing and doing a lot of treatment, seeing some really good practitioners, some really good doctors. I'm like, wow, you're doing a lot and it's really good work you're doing. Like I can hear the progress with what's happening. Except the visual image I got was like there's a big map, like a
Mm-hmm.
wheel, a circular wheel, and the center, and she wasn't there. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, you're not in the center of all of these things. You're really pulled off to one side,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not going to be able to embody or integrate all of these things that you're doing because you've been displaced from your core.
Mm.
You're not at home in your own system. So we ended up doing a process around that. That was beautiful for me because I just almost, it's like guiding me and I'm guiding it in a little, in a way of describing it. It's hard to describe. And then helping her find her center,
Mm-hmm.
but guiding her to find her center, because I think that's another piece is I want to ask questions so that people can find their own answers.
Mm-hmm.
Because how do I know what's really true and real for them?
Mm-hmm.
But if I can be a mirror and reflect and be the banks of the river to help guide them into that direction, they'll usually find it. And when they find it, it really lands and it really grounds in their system. And then all those pieces suddenly come together and they have a huge shift in their health.
Yeah. Just so much of the benefit I've experienced, even just in our connection, having Kevin in our life and all these family moments where there's there's this thing going on, Kev, help. And then he tunes in and he asks us questions and there's inquiring, and then it brings us new information to reflect on and how helpful that is. Because I feel two things are needed. I feel it's that place and space for them to find it on their own. And there's sometimes the place where it's, here's the reflection
Or
from where
sometimes lots of.
or lots of reflections.
Yeah.
This is really big in the work that we do. Is there are places where we're just giving the reflection, saying this may or may not be true. Check it out.
Yeah.
But from where we're sitting, this is what we're seeing. And
Or that came across a little bit blamey.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was experiencing that as shaming.
Yeah. That's
and just
what's going on there. What's happening?
Yeah.
Let's get to know that.
and calling it out and
Mhm.
how both are needed.
Mhm.
The piece that really stuck out from what you're sharing there is the reflection. We need reflections. Relational reflections are needed for us to allow to pass through, to consider. Like,
Mhm.
is that true for me? Is there something I'm not seeing? Do I have a blind spot? And I think of one of my earlier bigger shifts is when we had left one of the Tony Robbins events, and there was the 6 human needs that Tony goes over, and he just called me out. Hey man, like I was really struggling in that window of my life. I was like with work and how I wanted things and financially and relationship. You're like, Mike, I think your number one need is certainty. I think
Mhm.
that's what's creating so much havoc. And it was such a clear reflection that I wasn't considering that I was like, oh God, I'm so attached to certainty that I'm not actually allowed to blossom into the life I'm wanting to live because I'm not taking risks. I want to be in, Northern Alberta, Fort McMurray, where there's money and it's sure payments and all these things. But thank God you reflected that because I'm like, ooh, healthy hit of shame. That's not what I want as my number one value is
Yeah.
certainty.
Well, and what this brings up too, to move it into the relational dynamics a little bit more, we do need to take risks in relationship too.
Mhm.
And the way I've experienced this, where I wouldn't take risk in the past, is I wouldn't share how I really felt
Uh-huh.
because I was too worried about the ramifications of sharing something that might be challenging,
Mhm.
even though it was true for me.
Mhm.
That I was worried about their, response to me, or maybe they'd run away or they would leave. And my need for certainty of I have to keep this relationship would then shut down what I actually maybe wanted to share. And I wasn't willing to risk it
Mhm.
because I needed security.
Mhm.
So it would stifle things though, and it would keep it really stuck and really blocked. And this is also what I've seen in people's health is that wherever that might be happening in their life, in Chinese medicine, the philosophy is if something is stuck in the body and it's not moving, that's a problem
Mhm.
and is
Mhm.
going to create illness. If things are moving and flowing in harmony in the physical aspects and the energetics, everything's good. Immune system's good, heart's good, circulation's good, energy, vitality. They won't experience fatigue. So, definitely, if somebody's experiencing symptoms in their relationships or in their body, something's stuck,
Mhm.
something's
Mhm.
locked down. It's become stagnant in some way. And I've experienced it in that way where I was keeping it stagnant because
Mhm.
I didn't want to risk conflict, these things that I would avoid, which actually, it created more stagnancy in my own system
Yeah.
and inner frustration. And it just built more and more. And then by the time it moves, it has way more intensity than what is actually healthy because
Mhm.
it's been stuck for way too long.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and what you're speaking there, I feel like is this movement of moving towards self-love, moving towards what's needed. And I feel as if the center of what this wheel you were talking about, or the center of, is how am I relating with myself, right?
Hmm.
So how am I relating with myself, my body, my emotions, my to hear what what is stuck, what is. And for, I don't know about you two, but for me, when I think back to when I really started my healing journey and it was actually happening, it wasn't an idea, it was an actual transformation. It was when I was deeply starting to listen to, and step by step, you know, what I needed for food, what's happening
Mhm.
emotionally, and that learning to deeply listen and relate with myself to even know the steps for the healing.
Hmm.
And and then every step of that deeper capacity to listen and relate with myself then would bring me into better and better relationships too. But
Mhm.
it's almost
Yeah.
that dance between, I have to be able to listen deeply to myself, and then I need to also be able to deeply listen to other and let in others' reflections. And through that dance, is for me is where the healing really happened and started to blossom. But there's this interesting thing in our society, right? And I think it's important to name here is there's a lot of ideas that we're separate. And, like, I'm separate from you, and there's a truth that we have a sovereignty to us, right? We have a uniqueness, we have a unique, but we are so interconnected. Like, just sitting in this room, our bodies are feeling each other, our microbiomes are interconnected, our immune systems, where our bodies are getting information from each other constantly. We are so interconnected, and really, when you start to go down to the atom level, it's not even really clear where I start and you begin. And this can often be a thing that
Mhm.
comes up for people. There, oh no, I was influenced by this person's feelings, or oh no, I've, this. And there's a layer where Yes, you will be. We will be. We are. But then how do we become more intentional about that?
Hmm.
Who are we spending time with? Whose microbiomes are we hanging out with? Where are we living, and maybe even sharing a bit what you've noticed, how that shows up in people's bodies or in their relationships, where they're living and how they're impacted by that.
Well, and I think one of the key pieces you said is listening.
Mhm.
That what I've seen in many, many patients is that they've been conditioned to not listen to their body,
Yeah.
that symptoms are bad and
Yeah.
you need to get rid of symptoms all the time. So if
Yes.
you have pain or inflammation come up, get rid of that.
Yes, that's the problem.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
When really it feels now at this point in my career, that's completely the opposite.
Mhm.
That if you have pain coming up, the role that is ideal is to find out why
Mhm.
and then work with it because the body never lies. The body's always communicating. And it's actually what I think now the body's not capable of lying.
Yeah.
The
Right.
mind,
Mhm.
our thoughts and different things may do all kinds of things, but the body can't lie.
Right.
So if it's experiencing and expressing something, it is communicating with you, it is telling you something, it wants attention, it wants to be seen or understood. There's something that's being missed there.
Mhm.
And I could share thousands of stories. And even for myself, when I left practice in Langley, I was down there for about 10 years practicing. A lot of clients, a lot of patients, so much interconnectedness. It was really beautiful, and it was working really well in lots of ways. But I needed to move. I was traveling back and forth between the interior of BC and the coast, driving, and it became so exhausting and draining to me. Is like I have to go, but I had a hard time letting go of all the patients that I'd been in relationship with for like 10 years and their families and kids and all these beautiful things that I loved, but I knew I needed to go.
Mhm.
And through that process, there was a moment in time where my jaw got so
Mm.
tight, and I don't have TMJ issues. I haven't had historical headaches, jaw, teeth, like nothing. And it got so tight over a course of like 2 or 3 days as it was culminating to me actually moving and letting go completely. I couldn't even open my mouth. It felt like the most intense pain ever. And it was so disorienting and confusing. I'm like, what's going on here? I haven't done anything. I don't get this kind of pain before. And it felt like somebody was just in putting it in a vice and clamping it down every day more and more. And I
Mhm.
remember waking up one morning from the pain, and I was trying to eat breakfast and I couldn't even open my mouth enough to try and put food in. I'm
Oh.
like, oh, something really intense is going on.
Yeah.
And, we have a mutual coach, practitioner, kind of mentor, my buddy Chris that I've worked with over the years. And I messaged him, I need a session. And what we discovered through his reflection and holding space for me was that I was holding on and I didn't want to let go. I
Mhm.
didn't want to let go of all the patients. I was carrying so much responsibility and connection. And
Yeah.
it was so hard to like pry that energetic connection away from my system. And my jaw was holding all of it. And by the end of that call, identifying that's what was actually happening physically in my body and emotionally, the next day it was like 80% gone. And I
Mhm.
woke up in the morning testing it, opening my mouth, and I was like, oh my God, whoa, that's crazy. It was all me.
Uh-huh.
And the next day after that, gone 100%. So I
Mhm.
went in a matter of 2 days to excruciating pain, not sure what I was going to do. I couldn't even hardly talk and chew or anything. It was gone as
Mhm.
soon as it was seen and identified and
Yeah.
felt through. That's what was happening. Then no problem. So if I think about it medically, if somebody came to see another practitioner and they said, oh, you've got TMJ, here's
Mhm.
some pain medication. You got to
Yes.
get the inflammation down. Here's a bunch of pain blockers and things like that, any number of those things. Then those medications start impacting your gut
Mhm.
and destroying your gut, actually. Hard on the liver, hard on the kidneys, starts building up disturbance in your body and would actually perpetuate and deepen the issue while not addressing why it was there.
Mhm.
So you might get temporary relief from a pill or a medication with that, but it would persist until it was seen.
Mhm.
And then somebody might take a lot of medication to numb it so much, and they just carry on with their life,
Mhm.
never having that addressed. And suddenly, 10 years later, they've had chronic TMJ pain for a long time. and more medication and
Mhm.
more of all these other things. And that to me would be, oh, that's a big miss. They got really off track.
Mhm.
So I
And the
guess,
underlying thing didn't ever get
yeah, the
heard.
actual nugget
Yes.
of what
Yes.
could be released. In my
Yeah.
case, I didn't take medication of any kind, but I took a remedy of understanding
Yeah.
to release the energetic, clamp that then could flow. And then I could let go and move and transition and
Mhm.
move into that space. And so why I wanted to highlight that was the listening, and what's happened in our society so much is being taught not to listen to what the body is speaking
Mhm.
to, or what your heart is saying, or what your emotions are saying. That you might have an incredible amount of grief going on. In Chinese medicine, the lungs hold grief. So somebody might come in with a chronic cough that they haven't been able to get rid of for years, and by the end of that session, maybe we have identified that they've been holding on to grief because they've lost a parent or a loved one, and didn't really get this support in community or
Mhm.
with practitioners and things, and kind of isolated themselves with it
Yeah.
and buried it. And then boom, they got pneumonia, bronchitis, all these things, and they've now been given medications and puffers and everything
Mhm.
else, but it still hadn't addressed the root issue. And as soon as we identify it, maybe they have a huge emotional release in that session. They realize, oh, it is grief. Then they feel the grief, and within a week, they come back and their cough is gone. And I
Mhm.
haven't done treatment.
Yeah.
It's not a medication.
Yeah.
And even in some cases, I haven't given them a herbal formula, or maybe I give them something to help the physiology shift that much quicker, and it can be rapid. Like
Mhm.
they might stop coughing that day.
Mhm.
And I'm often surprised and blown away. They're like, oh, yeah, my cough's gone totally, just
Nice.
from a conversation.
The
Yeah.
listening.
It just really makes me think of Matt. This really stuck for me when I heard Matt Kahn speak to that true spirituality is following the pace of the body
Mhm.
and the speed of the body. Like we
Mhm.
really, this buzzword that's in our sphere is this embodiment, and this is what I feel like we're really touching on, is to be truly embodies, it's reconnecting to the messaging that the body is expressing.
Mhm.
Like every symptom is a loving nudge, a gift, information to get to know that piece. And where I see that inquiry happen, of instead of that collective consciousness, the conditioned world, the medical industry, where it's like, oh, symptoms, that's really inconvenient. It's really annoying. Get rid of them. How quickly can I get rid of them?
Yeah.
That's this invitation where it's going back to how are, like, what are those symptoms saying?
Mhm.
What part of your body is expressing the pain or discomfort or dis-ease? Oh, I wonder what that part of your body relates to. This is what I love about the work that you do in Chinese medicine. Oh, the liver, anger. Oh, back pain, money, stability. We go holding on anger. The more we make that direct connection of, oh, physical symptoms are directly related to what you're saying and not saying,
Mhm.
Mhm.
your boundaries, uh, whether you're speaking your truth or not. There's so many pieces.
And it can also be telling you that there's something wrong in your environment that
Yeah.
needs changing. Like sometimes it's an internal thing, right? And then sometimes it's an external thing. And where our environment, we're actually being told by our body that something's not good for us,
Mhm.
and we're overriding that. We're not
Yeah,
listening.
100%.
Whether it's relationship or whether it's the environment itself. Mike and I had a crazy experience of this where it turned out we were living in a home that had radon,
Mm,
very high levels of radon. And if any of you don't know, it's a gas that comes up from the earth and it's very poisonous over time. So, if you live in it over time, you can get really sick, but it also really chips away at your immune system. And so what was happening for us is there was a 5-month span where we were sick constantly and having so many issues. Our animals were sick, we were
the
sick,
son was sick.
our son was like there it was, and it was crazy. It was to the point where every time our friend Zara would come over, she'd be like, "Another thing? There's another thing?"
Cats are going to the vet. Now our dog's going to the vet. Oh, we're sick. And from a history, just with context, 10 years of not really being sick,
No, quite
all of a
healthy
sudden sick
people.
all the time.
And of course, what was confusing for me, I had to listen so closely because I was a mom of a a year 1 year old. I was breastfeeding, so stories were there. Well, it's because I'm breastfeeding. Oh, and that's why. Oh, and I felt so heavy and so tired, right? But there was also this process we had to go through of really what is go and not just starting to live that way, but actually the inquiry, the process of the inquiry. And, we ended up getting lots of testing and trying different medications and doing different alternative things. And then finally, I had the insight of, okay, obviously this is environmental because our cats, our dog, all of our
Yeah.
animals
The
are
whole
sick.
household is sick.
We checked our water, and then that's when I had remembered about radon. And then sure enough,
We bought a
really high
tester,
radon.
checked the levels, and
Like, it was to the point where Mike and I were getting illnesses that only children get. We got hand, foot, and mouth disease, and it was so rare that an adult would ever get that, and we got so sick. And, but what was interesting too when we were in that, first of all, listening to our bodies so that we got out of the radon because it was creating so much tension and stress in our life.
oh,
And I'm just actually grateful that the levels were high enough and that it was impacting us enough that we were aware of it because there literally are people that are living in that and probably don't even know that that's what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
And then also, what's so interesting is that what we've noticed is we've actually come into contact with quite a few people who were ended up it was they were living in high levels of radon, but maybe they didn't know it, or they did know it and decided to stay in that, and they end up getting divorced, which we were amazed at how much stress that underlying toxin
oh,
was having in our life. It was huge.
more
Yeah.
It
irritable.
was huge.
There's just so many layers. There's
Oh,
more ruptures during that time.
yes.
There's more stress because now we're going visits and more
Yeah.
financial costs and
Yes.
remedies. Thank you for all the remedies.
Yes.
And there's just so much stress from
Yeah.
that. And the thing that,
And when you're feeling
oh, and
heavy and
heavy
run
and
down,
lethargic.
it's so much harder to feel inspired about how am I gonna love my partner today?
How's your
Yeah.
nervous system doing today? It's
Yeah.
like, I feel terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that really comes in there too is the relationship to our intuition and how much that inner inquiry is required for that information, for the insights to come in.
Mhm.
Because it was you really tuning in.
Mhm.
We were both tuning in. What about this environment? I thought it was the water, so I put in a water
Mhm.
filter. We got samples checked out, and
Mhm.
then your intuition was like, oh, radon.
Mhm.
So we go and test that. So
It
there's
was
such an
actually when I
important.
asked the earth, like talking about relationship, I asked the earth that we were like, there's something here because I kept feeling when we lived here, I always wanted to be. And here's a really good example of how things like this
Oh
can affect your relationship. I kept wanting to leave the house. So I was always
yes.
wanting to go away. I was always wanting to take Cedar away. I was always trying to get away. And then, of course, that brought up a lot because Mike's like, why are you always trying to get away?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
And the
building a dynamic. And then the cost, because I was spending money on going
thousands of
places all the
dollars.
time. And then as soon as the radon was fixed, that went away. And I was, oh, my body was trying to get away.
Yeah.
And during that time, this is when we were in the exploration of buying this place, and there was a window where all of a sudden it was our dream home to you. I don't think I want to buy this place. I don't think I want to live here.
Yeah.
And then the remedies came in. We rectified,
Yeah.
grateful. There
Yeah.
was, our landlords that came in and remedied the situation, brought the levels down, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, we love this place. This is the best place ever. Oh my God, we're in our dream home.
And that
When that that environmental
piece
piece
was
was
addressed because I was,
addressed and
and it
resolved.
was triggering so many issues in our relationship because I was always trying to get away, taking Cedar away. And
Yeah.
my body was so wise. My body was
Yes.
saying, we need
The
to be
body
here as
wisdom.
little as possible. You need to take your baby and you need to be elsewhere.
Yeah.
And luckily, I actually listened in a way because I actually was probably taking him out of this scenario
Yeah.
more than if I just had stayed home all the time. So
Yeah.
there's such a wisdom. But then the amount of triggering and conflict, that came up in the relational field.
And just to speak to how much that can show up in the relationship and be projected, oh, my partner's so annoying and
Yeah.
frustrating, and I'm unwell because they're
Yeah.
emotional or irritable, and
Or
it can be,
Courtney's always trying to get away from me.
yeah, it's projected into the wrong place
Yeah.
instead of
Absolutely.
that deeper curiosity and openness of this is the question I love that you repeat so frequently is, well, I wonder what's happening.
Yes.
Like, let's look at all the things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder, it could, I'll even sometimes when we voice message, I'll share something. Yeah, it could be that. I wonder if it could be anything else or if there's any
Mhm.
other pieces in there too. And how much beauty can come from that
Mhm.
inquiry.
Mhm.
And kind of related, but it makes me think of I used to have a different business. I used to have a plumbing and heating company, and my body went into the most excruciating pain in my back. And when I tuned into it and asked, like, what is this about? I would just keep getting the hit, keep getting the whisper. Mike, this isn't your zone of genius. This isn't what you're here to do. You are not living your aligned life. You are doing the thing you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
You need to take the leap. You need to build your coaching practice. It's what lights you up every time you're working with clients. You're fulfilled, you're nourished, you feel better, you're happier, you don't notice that you have back pain. Maybe the back pain is directly related to your relationship to the work that you're doing.
Mhm.
And the second I made that bold step of I'm completely getting rid of this, never felt better in my body.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and everything from an ecosystem point of view, if we look at it that way, our relationships are an ecosystem, our home life's an ecosystem. And what I love about the radon story here is you were listening,
Mhm.
you were going through the processes of trying to discover what is actually happening here because you're curious enough to do that, and the intuitiveness and not giving up on, well, this is just kind of how our life is, because that happens for a lot of
Yes.
people. And so I love the reconnection to nature part. And so I look to animals in the animal kingdom for so many of my answers and insights
Mm.
about medicine.
Mhm.
And I would think of it too, like even a population of deer. I've shared this with many patients. If the deer start getting sick in a particular area and location, you would naturally think the water, something about the lake, something's contaminated, like what's happening, and you'd start to expand your scope. But people don't often do that. Some
Mhm.
people do, but the deer would naturally move to a
Mhm.
habitat where they weren't getting sick.
Yes, that's
But
right.
sometimes we're like, nope, I'm staying in
Yeah.
this job. I'm staying in this relationship. I'm not moving. It's
Mhm.
really making me very sick, but I'm not looking at any of it. And I
Yeah.
have a lot of compassion for that. I've been in that situation before in various degrees in various ways in my life. And then you look at nature and you're like, oh, there's a divine intelligence there that is
Yeah.
actually within us all the time. If we slow down and we start listening to that, the answers start showing themselves like quite clearly.
Mhm.
And this is what I see in the patient population. I get to work with lots of families, kids, elders, babies, everything in
Mhm.
between, and a lot of family dynamic systems where there might be one person that's really dealing with a significant issue or illness within that family system, but everybody's involved in it.
Mhm.
And so I like to look at
Right.
a bigger scope of
Yes.
what is happening here. Or in a coupleship, somebody might start having an aversion to their partner, and it might be because their partner drank contaminated water and picked up parasite
Right.
load, and their inherent biological wisdom is like, I don't want to sleep with you. I don't
Mm.
want to be intimate with you, but they may not have conscious awareness of why that is. And
Uh-huh.
then suddenly there's a disconnect and there's resentment that shows up, and it's like, oh, you don't desire me, you don't find me attractive. It's like, no, I do, but I'm going through this thing, and there can be a lot of ruptures and hurt around that. And it's like you drank some lake water and you unfortunately got some parasites, and your partner's biology is protecting themselves from that because they don't want to get sick also. So we
Yeah.
know, even if we don't know it consciously. So when that happens, I'm in my life now too, I get really curious. Something's happening here.
Mhm.
What might it be? Oh, actually, there's this thing that is actually really treatable and that could resolve it. And it has nothing to do with the relationship, but it sure looks like it does.
Mhm.
And what
Mhm.
is that mirror? What's the connection that's comes up? Because it can also mirror the other way.
Mhm.
A disturbance in the relational field can lead to somebody being more susceptible to getting infections or picking up parasites because of what's happening in their dynamic.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is yeah. We and it was interesting for us because, if we zoomed out even further of that radon story, we did a bunch of energy work, and the message was that we were actually needing to stabilize and learn how to
Mhm.
stabilize. And this was part of the lesson is we had been through all this chaos and there was a learning about stabilizing the field.
Yeah, and looking from that relational lens, look at how much health came back online
Oh, it was
by
huge.
communicating with the owners of the land,
Oh, yeah, through
where they
relationship.
really heard it, they
Yeah,
dealt with
that's
it, they
right.
came in and did their
That's right.
part, and we got to inform that that was happening. So
Yeah.
there was so much reciprocity, and this is one of the key pieces that I track for in the work that we're doing is how much reciprocity is in the coupleship,
Mhm.
and then how much reciprocity is there in the external relationships. Are
Mhm.
there friends? Are there, brotherhoods, sisterhoods, where there is a mutual connection of value,
Mhm.
where both people can be held in their vulnerability? When I look at the amount of health that's come online in my life with the reciprocity that we share in our relational dynamic,
Mhm.
where when the vicissitudes of life come in and there's the lows, there's someone to lean into, safe enough to bring those vulnerable parts. Because I feel like that's a big piece, when we think of the couples that we support, a lot of that stuck, blocked energy that you're speaking to in the system is the fear of bringing the vulnerability
Mhm.
to the other
Mhm.
person, projecting that unconsciously how that was rejected or put down or blamed in the past is just going to happen again. So then it's not shared. So then that part doesn't deepen in connection. That
Mhm.
intimacy doesn't happen. And then
Mhm.
it just keeps getting repeated unconsciously. Here's the pattern.
Mhm.
Oh, it's because they're doing this. It's because they're an idiot. It's
Yeah.
whatever it is, and then you can't go deeper into that deeper floor of health
Mhm.
because there's that fear of being vulnerable.
I'd love for you to share a little bit some of the themes you've noticed. You were saying just before we started recording around where people will have like recurring infections and then
Yeah.
that's related to codependency. And I'm even thinking of people who have skin issues and it's because they're not having enough boundaries and this kind of
Yeah.
thing. I'd be interesting just for you to share a little bit of those correlations you've noticed.
I think, and also for anybody that's new to Chinese medicine, just to tune in as we deepen into this, yeah, the lungs, the organ systems all have a related emotion.
Hmm.
And so the basic ones, lungs is more grief, liver's more like anger, frustration, kidneys is more fear,
Hmm.
spleen is more like excessive thinking, like really busy mind, like over contemplation is how it's linked. And so when we look at some of these places, when somebody presents with a particular illness or emotional dynamic going on, immediately I think about the organ system
Hmm.
in relationship to that.
Hmm.
And what I've seen in, maybe long-term clients that, maybe somebody comes in and they're dating and it's great. And then it's not great. And they're like, I hate that guy. And they break up. And then, 4 or 5 relationships later, I can see the pattern really clearly, but they may not,
Hmm.
that they're kind of dating the same type of
Mm.
archetype, but not really addressing. And they're like, that guy was a loser. I'm
Hmm.
like, you loved him in the beginning. What was that, right? And then I also notice sometimes what they have going on in the body is maybe recurrent UTIs
Hmm.
or recurrent infections.
Yes.
And you could see the mirror that there's something that continues to loop in the system that is not being addressed
Hmm.
on both sides. So maybe they get antibiotics and they get treatment recurrently for the UTIs, which clears it for a temporary time, but it doesn't resolve the deeper pattern.
Hmm.
And then it's again and
Hmm.
again, and then their gut flora is off and their immune system's compromised. And then pretty soon they're pretty fatigued. And then that is the quality that they're bringing into the dynamics. And
Right.
maybe the boyfriends break up with them repeatedly
Mhm.
because of how they're presenting themselves, but you can start to see like how it happened, but then they get stuck. So when I'm working with somebody in that way, it's like, okay, here's what's happening in the body: recurrent infections. Okay, your body's out of balance, your immune system's out of balance. That's for sure. Let's start working on restoring that physiologically. And there's lots of ways to do that. But also, I'm really curious. This is like 7 or 8 infections in over a few years or more. Something is happening in your body that continues to draw that experience to you. What's not really being
Mhm.
addressed here? Oh, you're in a recurrent looping pattern in your dating life or your relational life that you're not addressing. And then as soon as maybe we uncover some of those patterns, whatever it might be, I have seen this so many times that then months go by and I see them and they're like, oh, yeah, I haven't had an infection since we had that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When really, if we only look at it as, oh, that's bacteria or there's something wrong with my bladder, like it's just how it is. It's just how it's going to be forever. This is how I have to live my life. And I always question everything now of maybe, maybe not though. What else is actually connected into this completely? And I've seen this with, literally thousands of different types of visits that I like treating both.
Mm-hmm.
Both are important.
Yes, this
Not
is
just one or the other. And I'm sure you guys see this in the relationship coaching and the work that you guys do together. If somebody's physical system is in a fatigue state, chronic fatigue, or any number of things, autoimmune conditions, it makes it really hard to show up in a healthy way in relationship. Because if you're trying to talk with your partner and they're always tired,
Mm-hmm.
or they're leaving the conversation because they're too overwhelmed or fatigued and like, I got to go to sleep, it's pretty easy to start building some resentment around that because you're not being heard. You're not able to actually have reciprocity and that natural sort of equilibrium that can happen in a dynamic. There's an imbalance there. So I'm usually looking for, where's the imbalance in their life, externally, internally. Maybe they're home, maybe they have mold. I've seen that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That they feel better when they're out in the world, and when they come back to their home, they get tired and groggy and brain
Mm-hmm.
fog and don't sleep well and irritable and
Mm-hmm.
sick quite a bit. And then they go traveling for months and they're like, oh, I feel really good. It must be my job.
Right.
I took time off from my job. And it's like, yeah, that could be true. Something in your home though.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, hey, have you had the air quality tested? And they check and they're like, yeah, Kevin, it was so bad they wouldn't let me back in my home. Well, I am in an apartment calling you right now.
Oh my God.
That you were right, and this has been discovered. I'm like, how long you been living there? It's like, oh, 4 years, and I've had bronchitis 10 times. And
Yes.
so you can see all the places that can be involved in every dynamic of life, that there's no compartmentalization.
Yes,
That
that's right.
mold can impact your relationships because you feel shitty. And then the other person's like, I don't like this guy. He's just in a bad mood all the time. And it's like, it actually doesn't have to do with his personal dynamic, but it's being really highlighted. So there's a mirror sort of in every facet
Yeah.
of life.
Well, and even to speak to one of the ones I've had that has been a relational block, is I had this aversion to dealing with things on the physical level. Like I was like, I want to get to the energetics of this. I want to work with the emotions. I don't like this sort of thing, and almost an aversion to taking a pill, for example, or taking
Yeah.
something. And that actually was my block, because I had a block to thinking that sometimes, Courtney, you just need something on the biological level,
Yeah.
relationally. And so I was doing this with a urinary tract infection for so long, and I was working the energy, and I was, and then Kevin said to me, sometimes it's just literally that there's just the bacteria and it just isn't clearing up. And then I did one remedy, gone, never came back.
Yeah.
And it was so funny that I was resisting just the pure, oh, there's plants and there's these things that can come in and help me on a physical level.
Yeah.
And I don't have to do it all myself. And I don't
Yeah.
always have to get to the deepest root of the
What's the spiritual meaning of this? Yeah. Well, and what's really interesting with what you shared, I feel like one of the reasons the remedy I gave you works immediately
Yeah.
is because you did
Yeah.
do all the other aspects of work.
Yes.
Because there has been patients that come in that haven't addressed any of the mental emotional picture at all.
Yeah.
And I can give them a formula and I can treat what's there, and maybe it solves it and then it comes back.
Right.
And I immediately know there's more here to this picture.
Right.
And they're like, your remedy didn't work. I'm like, yes, maybe, but there's more here. And so when somebody has, hey, Kev, my diet's dialed, I get great water, exercise, I'm doing all these things, I've made some improvements, but I'm still kind of stuck in this one place. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? Sometimes the physical body just hasn't caught up yet to where you are consciously. And the work that you've done and the coaching and the
Yes.
counseling, like, don't stop doing that. That is setting you up for success. And it makes it way easier for me that I could design one remedy and it's completely solved. And they might say, I've taken 100 remedies from other doctors. You're so amazing. And I'm like, I don't know if it was actually that. It's that you've now been addressing all the areas in your life that were out of balance, that you change your internal ecosystem so that I could come in and look really good
Yes.
of I treated the one thing and it looked like a miracle, but it was actually everything that was involved in that. So there's definitely times where after maybe I help somebody on the physical level, then I am referring them to you guys,
Mhm,
or I'm
mhm,
referring them to, "Hey, can you now further address these places? We've got your body physically to a good point of stability. If you want to keep that, you now need to address these things, because
mhm,
if you continue to go back to that job that you despise and hate, or your relationship to it needs to change, you're going to be back here in 6 months or a year with the same issue. And I don't want to see that. I want to see you thrive. So now use this opportunity of feeling better. Your symptoms are depleted. Go and address the bigger picture. Or in some cases they've already done that, like you said, and then it's a pretty easy fix.
mhm.
But all those layers generally need to be addressed with anything that's chronic. You got to look at all of them.
Mhm.
Otherwise, yeah, you're in that loop, and it's not a fun loop to be in. So
Well, when we're looking when we're looking at ecosystem, the health of it is dependent on all the layers of resource.
Mhm.
Is there relational resource? Is there environmental resource? Like look at just some pieces that impacted when the fires happened here and there's smoke in the air.
Mhm.
That impacts the resource in the field. It impacts
Yes.
our presence when we're doing the thing that we're doing,
Yes.
and it's just so important to see it that way. Because when I look at what I love about this conversation is it really makes me think of how this shows up in relationship where it's this and that, where it's
Mm.
like what's happening for
yes,
this person and this partner is so valid and it matters. And what's happening for the other partner is so important and
Mhm.
it's valid. And they're very different worlds. Often, when you really start to inquire of what's going on, when we talk about, let's say, just the stickiness or patterns or imprints showing up in relationship, if you go deep enough, it makes so much sense why that person is feeling the thing, doing the thing, behaving that way.
Mhm.
And the more we can see that all of this really makes sense if you go deep enough,
Mhm.
that can bring in more love and compassion and grace is really what I'm hearing on a lot of this too, is the grace in the relational space does create healing.
yeah,
Mhm.
That compassion creates healing. Like that
mhm,
that brings in higher levels of health. It brings in more safety in the nervous system.
Mhm.
It brings in more freedom to embody those qualities that are wanting to come online, more empowered, confident, speaking what's true. It's so important. That whole ecosystem is paramount for that to happen.
Mhm.
When we're relating with the medical industry, it's important that there's so much value there. And
Mhm.
so is the version that you're in, and looking at more of the holistic emotional spiritual piece. Like both are necessary.
yeah,
Mhm.
And really what I love that we're talking about is how do we come back into that middle place? How do we regenerate the relational energy on the holistic
Mm.
plane?
yeah,
I love that you said, I love everything you just said. And one of the healing statements that we're meant to get this message from our mother, ideally, when we're young. And it can be words or it could just be energy, but it is, my love will make you well.
Yeah.
ooh,
And this understanding that it is it's the love that will make you well and that you can move towards love, and that what that does is it really helps us recognize to move towards connection when we're unwell, to move towards support, to move towards the love of the earth, the
Mm.
love of plants that can help us, people that can
yeah,
help us, spirit, but that real truth of, yeah, my love will make you well, and that we actually get to be this for each other. Not my love will make you well by, because that one version of the mother would be, I'm holding you and I'm anxious about it, and I'm going to fix everything and make sure you don't experience anything painful, and that's how I'm going to make you well, which by
Yeah.
the way won't make you well.
Definitely
It'll
not.
make you unwell. But what I'm talking about is the mom just being in the love of her child and just
Mm.
being there with them while maybe they're sick, they're hurt, they're just being there with them in the love, in the curiosity, in the togetherness, and then that's where wellness comes from.
yeah,
And that's what we're talking about really is repairing that energy of how we hold, our biology.
Yeah.
And I always think of the beauty of where they did all those studies where if you have a newborn baby, and there was even a story of a newborn baby who was dying and they tried everything, they're in the NICU, but then they brought in the twin and they laid their twin beside them and they instantly started to get better.
Mhm.
That's actually the power of relationship, co-regulation, connection.
Yeah.
And who knows what the twins' biology was able to feel that it could give in that moment
Yeah.
that our minds are can't capture,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. There's all the unseen
Mhm.
energetic components. And I love what you've both shared. Like, love is the healing aspect, and compassion, and
Mhm.
both of those in a medical setting or a clinic setting is so powerful.
Mhm.
And I would say, when I really observe the patient visits I've been in, and on the receiving end of myself, that energetic blueprint and that quality is what softens and melts away illness and
Mhm.
symptoms and patterns quite rapidly, actually. And then I think about my own health and frequency and biology. How am I in that moment? How present am I? And
Mhm.
what is my loving frequency? And the greater that frequency is for, like, self love for myself and love for the other, whoever
Mhm.
is sitting there, that shifts things. I have witnessed beautiful miracles, and
Mhm.
I didn't feel like I did anything, but I was sitting there being really present, and I feel really blessed. Like, I genuinely love humanity. I love people.
Mhm.
And the more I love myself in that, the greater my frequency is, and the greater space and energy I can hold, that anybody that then comes into that field can feel that. And it basically just, I feel like anyway, it reflects it back to their system, where they can start to feel themselves again and remember that they're human and soften towards themselves. And suddenly the emotions move and the energy moves, and the pain or the constriction or the inflammation in their system doesn't have a reason to be there anymore,
Yeah.
because they've felt something through, and they're remembering themselves and they're being witnessed, and we get to connect. And I look in people's eyes when they're in there, and you can see it, things start
Mhm.
shifting. And sometimes my staff will say at the front desk, what, that somebody goes in the room and they come out and they're standing up and they couldn't, or their face is different. And our bodies, our physicality can change so rapidly
Mhm.
when we're seen. And I know you guys have experienced that, probably, like, together, but also with the couples that you support, that they'll physically look different
Mhm.
as you help them
Mhm.
unpack the dynamics that have created tension.
Yes.
And then,
Aw.
oh, I see you again. Oh, your eyes are looking at me, or your eyes are clear, because we look at the spirit through the eyes a lot. And Chinese medicine talks about that, like the Shen, the spirit. And that's how Chinese medicine doctors historically would diagnose people too, just by looking at the quality
Mm.
of spirit in their eyes.
Mhm.
And I have seen this in our society too, that they call it like lusterless. When
Mhm.
somebody's spirit is diminishing in their eyes, and they may look fine, but you can see their spirit is not. And
Mhm.
you could base what would be happening or their direction based on what you would see in the quality of their spirit, like bright and shining,
Mhm.
full of luster, or lackluster and dullness. And this is one of the cool things that I've seen of people of any age. And I love being with, like, elders and people that have a lot more life experience than me. When their spirit is still healthy, you can see it in their eyes. Like, the eyes don't age in that way,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
there's still that fire
Yes.
burning brightly there, and it's so
Totally.
cool to see when it is there,
Uh-huh.
that the vibrancy that can still be contained within the physical vessel at any age is remarkable.
That's my favorite part of our work, and I know it is for you too, is
Yeah.
when we get to watch a couple move through things and then they're like snuggling, they're looking deep in each other's eyes, they come deeply into love. Hey, we
That's
will
usually
just
where we
we're
cry.
like,
It's
oh,
so much love to witness the coming closer together
oh,
through that
oh.
symptom. I want to bring it back into that because I feel like there's that, to condense that down, is how much love isn't just doing all the right things, isn't being kind in all the time. There's that deeper love, that true love. When we look at Pachamama, we look at the earth, we look at the mother role where she can be fierce. She needs to bring in the boundaries and the banks, and there's consequence. And no, you can't do that. There's love in the symptoms, and so
and the moving through the symptoms.
And the moving through the symptoms. So it's circling it back, to close with that piece. When we're looking at this biofeedback, this ecosystem, the relational feedback, those symptoms are love. There's information there to consider, to be curious about, to take responsibility for, to show up different, to make new decisions, to say something that needs to be said, to maybe take space from something that isn't adding to well-being. That's all still love.
Yeah. What is it Terry Real says? We actually can't unconditionally love our partner, because unconditional love is in the sense of, there's conditions to my love, in the sense of, hey, we're going to get well.
Yeah.
We're going to actually not just be okay with whatever's here. We're going to look at this. We're going to grow. We're going to change. We're going to let's grow into even more levels of love through moving through all the other things. And yeah, it's beautiful to be in the three of us here and feel the love in this room. And
I'm in my office going to do the outro, and Cedar is going to help me. Do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Do you want to say thank you all for listening?
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, we're so grateful. Are we so grateful?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in to this latest episode with Dr. Kevin Preston. And we hope to see you at the New Human. Again, the promo code is together15 to 15. Is there anything you want to tell them? And we hope to see you there.
We hope to see you there.
And yeah, thank you all so much once again for tuning in to the Together podcast. We're so grateful. And if you have any questions or topics you want us to dive into, email us. The email is in our show notes, or you can go and direct message us on Instagram. And till next time. This one for sure.
Now my head's not in the shot.
Perfect.
Getting ready with these two amazing humans.
Yeah.
Does this work?
You'd have to get my head in the shot.
Well, other than that,
and then we'll have the mic like this.
like this in between, because this is fist.
And so further than my fist. Yeah, I think that feels good. So
No clock needed. I'm in the timeless dimension.
Nice. Oh, this is so fucking fun.
It is so fun. Yes.
Oh,
Look at what we're doing.
We talked about this years ago. I remember driving around in my fucking work van in Fort McMurray, talking about podcasts, sharing Aubrey Marcus's podcast, and like, we should do a podcast one day.
Yeah.
And this is it.
Yeah.
We're doing it. We're both
This
doing
is
it.
the one day.
Fuck yeah.
this is what we do for a living.
It's so fun.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We get to do whatever we want for a living.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
You Oh, do you want to talk again? Just want to make sure it's switching right.
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
I can talk about stuff.
And then we can talk about
stuff.
Yeah, sweet. Cool.
I had this funny thing where I kept singing whenever he told me to do the mic, and he's like, just say words. He needed it to be words. I would sing all my
Of course, the feminine would sing.
It is going to bug me. I'm going to tweak his mic a little.
And I'm singing. I'm in a store and I'm singing. Me too.
And I'm singing. I'm singing a song, and this is my dad. And
he doesn't really know he's my dad.
And I'm so happy that I found my dad. He doesn't know. That was a really weird song.
That's not Santa Claus. Yes, it is. No, it's
Just so you
not.
know.